What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you a look at some just weird indie games that I really enjoyed, because I looked at the upcoming schedule for February and beyond with all its large AAA releases, AA releases, even some smaller games that look interesting, and I thought to myself, that's not enough for people, I'd like to make it worse. And so, I decided on sharing some of my favorite oddball games, mostly because I was talking about Betrayal at Club Low recently, which reminded me of other weird games I had really enjoyed over the years, which is naturally what we're doing here. Now, I will say here at the beginning, I don't necessarily mean that any of these games are particularly great, simply that I enjoyed them because they were weird and strange. And we're going to kick that list off with Mechajammer. Mechajammer is a game from back in, I believe it was late 2021, and it is a sort of 80s cyberpunk set in a jungle colony that is kind of grindhouse inspired as the game itself describes it. But Mechajammer here is in fact developed by the same people that are currently working on Banquet for Fools, another small game I've covered on the channel a couple times. And while this game did not receive a particularly warm welcome in terms of its launch because of, honestly just bugs and things like that, it had a whole bunch of really interesting systems because the entire world is a very systems-based one. You can build all sorts of characters, and your main goal basically is to lead this character out of this city by just about any means necessary, which involves doing all sorts of stuff naturally, but most importantly engaging with those oddball systems. For instance, one of my favorite ways to play this one is that you can, if you have the stats for it, just recruit random civilians and stuff like passerbys and turn them into incredibly large squads that you can just send en masse at your enemies. Or you can take the more traditional route, like just going in guns blazing or sneaking around in the shadows utilizing the stealth system. And it's very over-the-top sort of 80s movie carnage, even letting you drive around some vehicles. And while it's a game that clearly wasn't for everyone, I really enjoyed it, and I do wish it had done a little bit better than it did. But bringing you an exceptionally deep cut, we then have Sang-Froid, Tales of Werewolves. I'm sure I'm pronouncing that wrong and somebody will yell at me for it. But when you boil this game down, it is effectively just a tower defense game that I played forever ago. In fact, I want to say it was like one of the first games I bought directly on Steam, as I did not have a Steam account personally until I was forced to make one for Skyrim, actually. I still have my original copy of Skyrim, and when you bought the PC version of it back in the day, they were like, hey, you're going to need a Steam account for this. So I made one, and the rest is history. But this game I bought directly on Steam because honestly I just think werewolves are pretty cool. But our goal, basically, is to have two feuding brothers save their sister by fending off all sorts of werewolves and things like that that are coming to your cabin to try to kill you because your sister is in fact possessed by the devil. That story is actually pretty good. There's a ton of writing and dialogue and stuff that you probably wouldn't expect in a game like this, which, again, basically a sort of 3D tower defense game. And during the day, you'll stock up and supply the best you can, but at nighttime, you have to do things like lay traps and prepare for the oncoming waves of enemies trying to get to your cabin and kill you all. Now, one of the reasons I probably enjoyed this so much is because back in the day, right around the time I was in high school, I would go to websites like Congregate, which I'm not sure even exists anymore, and one of the things you could do on there is just play like free flash games and stuff, which included a lot of tower defense titles, and this was like a slightly more advanced version of those, so I really enjoyed the time I spent with it. But that brings us to our third entry, which is Iron Danger. Iron Danger is, technically speaking, like a TRPG that has an interesting story revolving around some, I would say pretty typical medieval fantasy warring nations type stuff, but realistically the big thing to talk about here is the game's unique combat system. You see, it employs a sort of time-bending mechanic where you can roll back a certain amount of actions and redo things and try them over and over again until you find exactly the way you want to handle a situation. So it is definitely more on the puzzle side of tactics, but enemies are moving when you're moving in a sort of simultaneous turn-based situation, and as a result of that, the time mechanic is very useful at trying things and seeing how individual actions might play out in a very sort of instant gratification way that a typical TRPG combat puzzler might go about things. It's also not very long. This one took like 12 hours to 100%. So if you find yourself looking to try something a little bit different, you can regularly find this one on a deep sale. I think right now it's on sale for like $2. And I think it's worth it just to see those systems in action. But that does bring me to my fourth entry, which is Space Wreck. So Space Wreck is something very rare, actually, which is a very short CRPG. Now, as the name of the game might imply, it's a game all about space wrecks. Specifically, you need to scavenge a bunch of them to get your ship in a good place so you can carry on your way. But that journey inadvertently puts you at odds with a whole host of different characters you'll meet, which, utilizing the skills of the character you've made, you'll be able to navigate in a sort of guns blazing fashion if you want to, but most situations have a much more amicable solution, and if anything, combat is really the hardest way to go, primarily because you have so many other options to explore. And while, if you wanted to do everything, this game wouldn't take you very long, in fact, realistically, a single playthrough is going to run you like 2 to 5 hours, it is extremely replayable. So if you've ever wanted to play something that felt like a, classical CRPG type of situation, but really don't have the time to invest in one, Space Wreck might be for you. I think just honestly the fact of how short and replayable it is was a very novel concept, seeing how long these types of games usually are. Plus, it does all of its systems and approaches to them quite well, and I think there's a lot of good things to say about Space Wreck, as you could probably tell. And then, last but not least, we have Wigmund. Wigmund is a game I reviewed a long time ago, before it even had achievements on Steam, actually, and it is a sort of top-down ARPG that I honestly just found really charming. Truth be told, there's a million games that do basically everything this game does, but better. But something about the combination of all of it here with this particular title and how it approached, an open world system kind of reminded me of Divine Divinity, but, a little worse quality-wise, perhaps. Now, they've actually added on to it a bunch since I played it last, the achievements, as I mentioned, but also new systems like crafting, professions, a new game plus system, either rework of enemies, that type of thing. And it's a really short and sweet, oddball little game that, while probably not going to blow you away, is a game that when I finished it, I was like, yeah, that was fun. If, albeit a little bit weird and strange, not least of which because the writing's a little bit odd in places. But more than anything, it's charming, which has hopefully been the case for more than at least one video on this list, and if that happens to have been the case, by all means let me know how you feel about it down in the comment section below, or perhaps tell me about other weird games you yourself enjoyed. I'd love to hear about them, which naturally means to like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.